Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. So today video is on NestJS and Angular application CRUD example. So let's understand communication between Angular and NestJS and MongoDB for a user request. Okay, whenever user request, first request will goes to Angular server application. Okay, wherever Angular is hosted, so their request will be received. Okay, so once Angular application receives request, all the JS file gets downloaded onto the browser. Okay, now everything, the pages, everything will be painted on the browser based on the JavaScript. Okay, if user clicks any navigation menu or a link on the website, it won't go for server again. Okay, the content gets replaced dynamically with the help of Angular router logic. Means for every request, page won't be reloaded. Okay, so it is a single page technique. Okay, Angular application is a single page technique, but to display some dynamic content should be come from server. For that we are going to use backend API. So in our case we are going to use the NestJS application. So NestJS is a framework that builds on top of Node.js. Okay, NestJS is nothing but Node only. Now here NestJS will be our API. So the Angular applications will contain HTTP request. Okay, so those request gets invoked from our browser and that request goes to our API endpoint. Okay, once the NestJS or the API receives the request, based on its request, uh, controller and action methods, which are nothing but a class and functions inside of our API, gets executed. And this API will invoke the MongoDB or any kind of database for fetching the data, because API itself cannot store the data. Okay, the physical storage of data will be exist in the database. So here API depends upon the database. So once the data is received, application returns that data as a response to the our client application, nothing but Angular application as a JSON format. Okay. Now once Angular application receives that data, it's dynamically bind and display the data on our UI. Okay, this is how flow exists with Angular and NestJS and MongoDB communication for a simple user request. Okay, so let's try to create NestJS application and walk through the existing files inside of it. Okay, for installing NestJS or creating the NestJS project, our local machine should contain the Node.js server. Okay, Node.js server helps to pull the required packages that are needed by our NestJS application. Okay, so go to Node.js download page, and based on your operating system, you can download your Node.js version. Okay, once that is done, the next thing is we have to install the NestJS CLI in our local machine. Okay, so NestJS CLI, by installing NestJS CLI in our local machine helps us to give a command line access for creating the NestJS application into our local machine. Okay, so first you have to run this npm I for install, -g for global level, and @ nestjs/cli. So this command we have to install in our local machine. Okay. After installing the CLI into our local machine, the next thing we have to do is we have to create our project. So this is the CLI command for creating project. Nest space new space name of your project. Okay. So copy this command and create a folder in your system. Okay, so in that folder we are going to maintain both our NestJS application and Angular application for our demo purpose. Okay, so after creating project, open that command line terminal. Okay, so paste the command and give an appropriate name for your project. Okay, Nest 9 and 14 API. Okay, this is my application name. Let's create the project, and we can observe here our NestJS application successfully created. Okay, so now we have to open our NestJS application in an IDE. Okay, one of the best IDE is Visual Studio Code Editor. So go to Visual Studio Code. Okay, go to Visual Studio Code download and click on this Visual Studio Code.visualstudio.com. Okay, from here you can download the editor, which is a free and very useful editor. Okay, now let's open our project inside of our Visual Studio Code Editor. For that, first we need to go to the root folder of our project, that is cd space nest 9 14 and API, and we are on the folder of our project. Now from here we can open the Visual Studio Code Editor. So command is like code space dot. Okay, this is our NestJS application, and let's explore the files inside of this application. Okay, default files. So first go to package.json. So package.json contains uh, commands like how to run the application, how to build the application, and also dependencies. Dependencies are nothing but the libraries that are required to run the NestJS application. And here you can see our NestJS version, that is 9. Okay, and like that all the required dependencies for to run the applications, their configurations will be added here, and dev dependencies. So these are also libraries but are required for at the time of development. Okay, so like that package.configurations will have all the commands and the library references. Next you can see the tsconfig.json file. This contains how to build the TypeScript, or how to run and how to output the result once the application is built. All the configurations will be available here. Next, go to src, and here main.ts file. So this is the entry file for our NestJS application, and you can see here it is using Nest Factory for to create the application start. It's using the app module. So app module is our root module of our entire NestJS application. And here we can see one more configuration to run our NestJS application at the port number 3000. Okay, so main.ts is our entry file, and app module is our entry module. Okay, and here is the controller. So we know that API contains controller and the action method. So these action methods get executed for each request. Okay, and here app.controller is totally optional. If you want to use it, or you can ignore it. Same way app.service also totally optional, because we are going to create our own individual modules and add those modules as a reference into our startup app module. So app module is mandatory because main.ts loading app module, but app controller and app services are optional to use. Okay, so those are the required files we have to know about in our NestJS application. Okay, next let's try to add a debugger into our application. Okay, so debugging an application is very important, right? For that, let's try to add the debugger, how to debug our NestJS application. Okay, so for that, first thing is click on this run and debugger menu item, and here you can see to customize and run debug, create a launch.json file. So click on this create a launch.json file. So here our application is Node.js, right? Select on Node.js environment. Okay. So once you select it and launch.json file gets created with a default configuration. Okay. But we cannot use these configurations. Okay. So to add new configuration, click on this add configuration button, and it will ask us type of like framework launch settings we want to create. Okay. So I'm going to search for Node. Okay. I want to attach. Attach means we want to attach a process for the debugging. Okay. So click on it. So these are the configurations required for my debug mode. So I can remove these unnecessary configurations from this array. Okay. And my debug configurations look like this. First thing is go to package.json. We have to run our application in debug mode. Okay. In the package.json file, we can found some commands for running the application. Okay. Simple npm run start means it will just start the application without any debugger. But we want to add the debugger, right? So I want to run this command. For that, open terminal. Okay. Command is like npm run start debug. Okay. Run the command. So here you can see our application is successfully runs, and here you can see the existing uh, our routes in our application, and you can see some console log here debugger is listening. Okay. Now go to my app controller to add a small testing debugging. Okay. So I want to add a debugger at this line. For that you have to click here. You can see a red color dot. Click on it. So if red color dot highlights here, it is a breakpoint. Okay. So now go to again this run and debug and click on this attach button for starting debugging. Okay. Now you can see debugger is attached. Okay. Now if I access the endpoint, I must hit the debugger at this line. So for that, localhost, I know the port number, that is 3000 for my NestJS application. And you can see the debugger is activated. See. So from this, we can debug like this. So if you want to go over the step, you can click it. If you want to go internally, if there are any methods, you can click it. If you want to come out of the some method from the debugger, you can click up arrow. Okay. If you want to go for next debugger point, you can click continue. Okay, like that you can do. Okay. So like that you can do. If you want to disconnect debugger, you can click on the disconnect. Okay, that is how we can enable the debugger into our NestJS application. Okay, next we are going to create the Angular 14 sample application. So in this demo, we are going to create Angular application. So Angular application built on components. Okay, components comprise of three files like component TS file, component HTML file, and component styles file. Okay, so these three files combinedly make a Angular component. Okay, and the, in these three files, the communication between component TS file and HTML file has supports two-way binding, means data flow in bidirectional, means HTML to TS file and TS file to HTML data can be transferred in a component. Okay, and events also can be listened from HTML to component. Okay, so this is how a simple Angular component flow looks like. Okay, now let's create our Angular 14 application. Okay, before creating Angular application, our local machine required Node.js. Okay, since Node.js is already installed, while we creating the NestJS application, right? So that job is finished. Next thing, we have to install the Angular CLI into our local machine. Okay, so this is the command npm install -g. -g represents global level space @Angular CLI. Okay, just copy this command and open the terminal wherever it is fine and just run the command. Then after a few seconds, Angular CLI is installed into your local machine. So with this CLI commands, we can very easily create Angular related projects and internal file structures, etc. Okay, so please install the CLI. Next, we already created NestJS, right? So in the same folder, we try to create our Angular application as well. Okay, open command prompt. Okay, and command to ng command for creating the Angular application like ng space new and name of your project. Okay, I will name it like nest 9 and 40 UI project. Okay, so here it will ask few configurations from us. So would you like to add Angular routing? Let's say yes by entering Y. Yes, we will use Angular routing. And here it is asking to choose type of CSS file that should contain in our project. You can use CSS, SAS, less, and normal CSS. Okay, I will use normal CSS. Okay, and now it's going to try to create the Angular application by installing all the required packages to support our application. So Angular project successfully created. Let's go to the root folder of our Angular project. Okay, and now we are going to use Visual Studio Code Editor as our working editor. Okay, now to open Visual Studio Code Editor directly in our root folder, enter command like code space dot and enter. Okay, this is our project. So let's explore the existing files that are created on creating our application. Okay, first thing is package.json file. So package.json file contains like scripts, dependencies, and dev dependencies. So scripts contains commands to run, build, test our Angular application. Okay, dependencies means direct libraries that are required for our application to run. Okay, and dev dependencies means those are also libraries, but we required only at the time of development. Okay, so you can see the Angular version @Angular any library contains the version that is 14, which is the latest Angular version. Okay, this is the package.json file. And next, you can see angular.json file. So this contains all Angular related configurations like build and output directory. Everything will be configured here. Next, go to src folder and here is the index.cshtml. So Angular is a single page application, right? It will contain one and only one HTML page. So this is the page going to render when the user requests our Angular application. Okay. Remaining all routing related pages are dynamically painted on the page based on the JavaScript. Okay. Once the JavaScript all code is downloaded for the first request, if you navigate on the Angular page, it won't go to server. Okay, it will handle the request within the JavaScript and replaces the content based on the routing values. Okay, and in this index.html, you can see a tag, custom tag that app.root. So this is the Angular rendering HTML element. Okay, and inside of this element, all the content gets rendered. Okay, so this is about index.html. And Angular contains our main.ts file. Okay, So this is the entry file for bootstrapping or bundling our Angular module. So if you observe here, app module is our entry module. So this main.ts try to load the app module. Okay. So if you go to app folder, you can find the app module. So this is the parent of every module in our application. Okay. And this is the default component like app.component.html, app.component.ts, and app.component.css. So you find three files, right? These three files comprise of app component. Okay. So this is the default component we will get when we create our Angular application. And here you can see one more file, that is app routing. So this is the file where we can configure the routing, and this reference is added to the app module itself. Okay. So now let's run our application and check how it looks. Okay, open terminal. Now command is like ngserve. So ngserve will internally starts the local host and runs our Angular application within that local host. So our Angular application runs at port number 4200. So application build is successfully open, and here you can see some console. Angular development server is listening at localhost port number, open HTTP localhost 4200 in the browser. Okay, copy this and try to navigate in our browser. See, you can see a nice UI Angular application. This is the default UI provided when we create the Angular application. Okay. So this is how our Angular application looks at initially. Now what I will do for my styling purpose to complete our demo, I am going to use the Bootstrap into my Angular application. Okay. So to install the Bootstrap, let's go to Bootstrap official website. Okay. And if you scroll down, here you can see the npm package way of installing the Bootstrap. So let's copy the first one. Okay. And open one more terminal and paste the Bootstrap command here and try to install it. Okay. Package is installed successfully. To confirm it, we can go to package.json file, and you can see as a new entry bootstrap preferences added in the dependencies. Okay, that shows package is successfully installed into our application. Next, after installing the bootstrap, we need configuration for bootstrap css and js files in the angular.json file. Okay, so go to angular.json file, and here you can see styles array, right? In the styles array, let's load the bootstrap css file that is installed inside of the node modules folder. Okay, so node underscore modules. Okay, nothing but I am trying to get the reference from this folder. Okay, node modules bootstrap list css min.css. Okay, similarly I need to add the JS reference as well. Okay, so node modules bootstrap dist JS min.js. Okay, so now with JS files we are configured successfully. So after changing this Angular JSON file, we have to restart our application to show or to feel the effects of the bootstrap. So click on Control C to stop the local server. Okay, again run ngserve. Okay, meanwhile it is running. What we can do, here is the default HTML page of our Angular application, right? Here I want to remove this entire default HTML code, and now I want to add the bootstrap menu here. Okay, for that let's go to app component.html. Okay, So this is the HTML, default HTML that is showing on our application. Okay, let's remove this entire, okay, entire HTML. Okay, up to here, delete it. And here you can see one element, custom element, which is nothing but a Angular component element, router element. So this is the element, okay, where routing based content will be rendered inside of it. Okay, so app component HTML will be the shared file. So any page content will be rendered inside of the router outlet. So it is good to add our menu at the top of this router outlet, so that menu will be shared to all pages of our Angular application. Okay, to add menu, go to Bootstrap website and go to docs, and here we can check for the nav bar. So here is the nav bar. Okay, and let me copy this. Okay, nav bar, like this nav bar. But currently I don't want any of those menu items. So let's try to remove them all one by one. Okay, this is also I don't want. Okay, here is the heading navbar brand. Class represents the like a menu or a logo or the heading of our application. So in this demo, I am going to do a simple CRUD operation on supervillains, adding, deleting, editing, updating. Okay, so I will name it like superheroes. Okay, superheroes application, my application is. Okay, now I want, here you can see this is a white background menu, right? I want dark background menu. For that, we have to change the theme colors of the menu. I want a black color. So just copy this navbar dark and PG dark. Okay, and here remove the BG light and paste our CSS class. Okay, now it's going to render the black color. It's going to render the black color navbar. Okay, so since our application is already running, right, let's try whether these changes are affected in our application or not. See here, my bootstrap menu is successfully added with superheroes as my heading and black navbar as my menu bar. Okay, next we are going to deal with creating the MongoDB and try to connect the MongoDB into our NestJS application. Okay. So to communicate or to fetch the data into our NestJS application, here we are going to use the MongoDB. Okay, MongoDB is a document-oriented database which is classified as NoSQL. Okay, in MongoDB, the terminology of calling tables is different. Okay, in MongoDB, tables in general we use terminology like tables, right? In MongoDB, we call them as collections. And in general, inside of the table, what we store? Records. So here it is a collection, right? Inside of it, we are going to store the document. Okay. And this document is of format. Generally, it looks like JSON, but its actual format is BSON. Okay, so BSON is nothing but a binary format of the JSON. Okay, so MongoDB is a NoSQL document oriented database. Okay, and collections are equivalent to the tables in the MongoDB. Okay, so to, to consume a MongoDB, we have to have a MongoDB, right? For that, I am going to use one of the cloud service, which is a free, so we can learn without investing any money. Okay, for learning purpose, we can choose the uh, package of free package of the cloud service. Okay, for that we simply browse like MongoDB. Okay, and you can see a link for MongoDB Atlas, which is a cloud data platform. Okay, click on it. Okay, once you click on the link, you can see here for a start free. My suggestion is uh, please click on the start free and register with MongoDB cloud, okay, and sign up for it, and it will display the options to create a cluster, okay. This cluster is nothing but some service provided in the cloud. So inside of the cluster, we can create our MongoDB database. Okay. So those steps are quite easy and you can easily do them by selecting the free package. Okay. Since I have already done, I will directly sign up with my dashboard. Okay. So if you go through the free step also after registration, you have to sign up and you can see the dashboard of the MongoDB cloud. Okay. So this is our dashboard for the cloud service that is provided by Atlas MongoDB. Okay. And now here you can see a cluster. If you created cluster, the cluster name will be available here. Okay. If you want to create a database here, you should go to the browse collections. We know collections means tables. Okay. To create a collection, click on the browse collection. Okay. Since I have already have some sample database, it is directly showing here. If you are newly created or newly sign up with this Atlas MongoDB, the dashboard will show you a buttons here. So button is like add my own data. If you click on it, it will display a pop-up. Okay. And there you can create your database and collection. Okay. So let me create a database. So if you already created, you can see a create database button. If you're totally new, down here you will see a button like add my own data. Okay. So I am clicking. Okay, let me create a new database like Angular 14 and YT. Okay, YTDB, YouTube DB. Okay, so this is my database name. And while creating database, you can create one table. Okay, sorry, collection. So for this demo, I choose it to display some superheroes in the Angular UI project by consuming the API call. So I want to get the some superheroes data. So I will create my collection name like superheroes. So click on create. Okay. Now you can see here my database new database is created. Okay. And I have a collection like superheroes. Okay. Now for testing purpose, you can insert a document here. Okay. So I told right in collections, data is stored as a document. So document is in format of originally it is a BSON, but it looks like JSON because BSON is nothing but binary format of the JSON. Okay. So if you click this toggle and here you can add your sample data. Okay. For this demo to insert a sample record, I have prepared a JSON object with one document. Okay. So let's insert it and test it. So here is my JSON. So my document contains properties like name, power, franchise, and email URL. Okay. So copy this data. Okay. Remove this existing data and paste it here and click on insert button. And you can see data is successfully inserted. And MongoDB will create a ID underscore ID with some uh, unique code. Okay. So we successfully created MongoDB database and inside of it we created a collection and for testing purpose we have inserted one document into it. Okay. Now we have to create a connection string for this database so that that connection string can be used by our NestJS application to communicate with this cloud database securely. Okay. So before getting the connection string, we have to do couple of work. That is like first thing, go to the network access menu at the left hand side. Okay. So here you need to add the IP address. Okay. So if your application is hosted, then your server IP address need to be added here. For developers, we are doing at our local system, right? So you simply add your public IP address. So you search like what is my IP? It's going to give your public IP address of your Wi-Fi or your mobile network. Okay. So because it is protected by the IP address as well to interact with this Atlas MongoDB cloud service. Okay, that is one thing we have to do in prior. Okay, and the next thing we have to create is database access. So here we have to create the users. So if you have already signed up initially, you will get default username here. Okay, so if you want to create one more user to access the database, you can create here by clicking it. Okay. So by creating a user here, there are two uh, properties that are needed by the connection string, that are username and the password. Okay. So if you forgot password, you can regenerate the password. Okay. By editing the password, you can regenerate. Please store it securely because it is one time visible, because next time you want to see it, you have to regenerate it. Okay, every time the password should be regenerated if you lost it. Okay, so please keep your password securely. Okay, now let's try to create the MongoDB connection string. For that, go back to dashboard database menu. Okay, and here you can see a button like connect. Click on it, and here it will show different environmental connection string like Mongo shell, your application, compass, and connecting VS code. Okay, here my aim is to connect with my application, right? NestJS application. So I simply choose this connect with my application, and here is the MongoDB connection string. Okay, so copy this and save it somewhere so that we can use it in our Angular NestJS application. Now let's get back to our NestJS application. To consume this MongoDB into our NestJS application, we require few libraries. Those are like NestJS slash Mongoose and original library, that is Mongoose. Okay, we need to install these two libraries. Okay, to copy the installation command, you can go to the official documents of the NestJS. Okay, and on left hand side you can see the techniques and go for the MongoDB. And here is the first line that displays to install the nested slash mongoose and mongoose, two libraries need to be installed. So copy the command and open our terminal, paste it. So packages successfully installed. To confirm it, we know where to check. Yes, we have to go to package.json, and in the dependencies you can see mongoose and NestJS slash mongoose, both libraries installed in our application. Okay. Now we have to configure the connection string. For that, first we have to import the mongoose module into our app module. Okay, go for app module, and in the import section, okay, you can write like mongoose module and for root. Okay, and here you can simply pass the connection string. So we know our connection string, right? So I'm copying my connection string and I'm going to paste it here. Here we can see username is automatically added to my connection string. We need to provide password. Okay, so I'm going to provide the password which I saved it securely. And you can see here, so for suppose this connection string is good. Okay, and if you try to access, what this connection string going to give access, right? Here there is no sign of any database registration, right? So if you do straight away using this connection string, then it's trying to search for the test database. Okay, test database. If the connection string is the database is not explicitly specified in the connection string, then it is automatically searches for the test database at this cluster. Okay, but if you want to specify a specific database, see here .NET slash is there, right? After this and before the query parameters, we have to specify our database name within the connection string. Okay, we know our database name. So to get the database name, you can browse collections, right? And this is my database name. I'm going to copy this name. Okay. After the .NET slash, just paste the database name. Now this connection string always communicate with this database. Okay. If you don't specify, its default searches for the test name based database. Okay. And here also provide your password. Now, to test our application is able to communicate with our database, just start the application and in the terminal, there will be console logs, right? If the connection fail, it will display there itself. Okay, let me start my application. Okay, here you can say unable to connect to the database. Most probably issue with either with my IP address or issue is with my password. Okay. Okay, now I have changed my public IP address. See, Mongoose core module dependency initialized. That means my database connection, establishing the connection is successful. Okay, so mostly when you get unable to connect the database error, mostly either your server IP address must be changed or else your database password is given as wrong way. Okay, so now the connection established is successful. Now let's create a new module. Okay, so this demo I'm going to display superheroes, right? So I'm going to create endpoints like read, delete, update, create, right? So to create those functionality, I'm going to create the separate module. Okay, so let's create the new separate module and open one more terminal. And creating modules using NestCLI is very easy. So command is like nest space G represent generate space MO. That means please create a module for me. Okay. Space name of the module. Okay. I will name it like super hyphen heroes. So now I just want to create my module. Enter. And here you can see the message like created, like module is created and app module is updated. So let's check our file structure. Here you can see superheroes module folder is created. Inside of it, superhero module is created, and inside of the app module, superhero is automatically imported. Here you can see superhero module is automatically imported to app module. Okay. Now to communicate with superheroes model inside of my NestJS application, I need to create a entity, and that entity must be represented as a schema, MongoDB schema, so that I can query or filter or search for the MongoDB database using the schema. Okay, so this schema can be generated with the help of the libraries we have just installed. That is NestJS Mongoose and NestJS normal Mongoose. Okay, so we have to first we have to create a class that represent this superheroes collection in the MongoDB. Okay, so I want to create a superhero schema class inside of this module folder. Okay, So command is like nest generate. I want to create simple class. Okay, class and super inside of superheroes folder, right? Superheroes folder. Okay, I want to create a new folder inside of that module folder, that is schema. Okay, and now I want to mention my class name, that is superhero dot schema. Okay, this is my class name, and I don't want to create any additional superhero schema folder because I am already creating schema folder explicitly, right? So to avoid any folder creation for the specified file name, I have to mention the flag like flag. And I don't want to create spec file as well. So I will specify no spec. Okay, enter. Okay, this is my schema class got created. We can go to the file. Okay, schema folder is created and superhero schema class is created. And just make this class as superheroes. Okay, and this class must be mapped with our MongoDB collection. Okay, for that I need to decorate this with schema attribute that loads from the nestjs slash mongoose. And here we can provide some options. Okay, by default, if you don't specify anything, the schema generated from this class will add s here. So collection name, to generate the collection name, it will add one more s. Okay, so if you want to specify explicitly the collection name, you can specify here in the object. So I am going to specify collection name. So my superhero collection name is this one, right? Copy this name and paste it here. If you want to auto generate, just leave this and make sure then your class look like this, because s will be automatically added. If you add s or schema, what it will do, it will add one more s. When query is initiated, it unable to find superheroes double s, right? So those cases, to avoid auto generation, you can explicitly say the schema and the collection name. Okay. And now we know our document contains these properties, right? We should map each property in this schema. Okay. For that, so the first property in the documentation, name, right? So name, which is a type of string. And to make it map with the MongoDB document property, it should be decorated with the prop. Okay, that loads from the nestjs slash mongoose. Okay, same way, all properties should be registered with the props property. Okay, this is our class that represents our collection look like this. Now from this class, we have to generate the schema. Okay, to generate schema, and we are going to export the schema as well. So export const superheroes schema. Okay, and to generate the schema, we can use schema factory that loads from the nestjs slash mongoose dot create per class. Okay, and we have to pass the class. So super heroes. Okay, so we are generating the schema here. Now here we need to return the type as well. Okay, so this type will be used in the services for the model. So export type superhero document type, because originally we are going to return document type, right? So name it like superhero document equal to, either it should be our superheroes class type, and import from mongoose. Okay, we have to import the document. Okay, document. Okay, so our schema file looks like this. Now we have to register our schema at our future module. So our future module is nothing but our child module, which is the superheroes module. Okay, so go to superheroes module. Here, let's add a property like imports, which is a type of array. Okay, now I can import mongoose module. So in app module, we use for root, right? So that is like parent method. In the child modules, we have to use the for future. So here we are going to define our collection mapping. Okay, so open array and object. So it will have name. So most probably give the name just like our collection name. Okay, and next schema. We have just generated our schema, right? Superhero schema and the collection name. We know our collection name, right? Give the collection name. Okay. So we successfully created a schema class and registered that schema class in our superhero module. Now let's create a service. Okay. In general, NestJS, any database logic like filtering the database or fetching the database or updating the database, all those logic must be written in the services. Okay. Service file. So first generate that service file. Okay. So to generate that service file, let's use our CLI command like nest space G for generate space S. S represents service file. Service file is nothing but a injectable file that contains all database communication logic. Okay, so I can simply specify the name of the file, superheroes, and I don't want any specs. So now how it will be created? Superhero. I have given my service name should be superhero. So NestJS, what it will do, it will search us for if there is any folder with that name or not. Yes, there is a folder name with superhero. So inside of it, it will create TS file like super-heroes.service.ts file. Okay. So to check that, let's run this command. So technically what I am doing, I am creating a service file inside of my superheroes module. Okay. So you can see inside of the superheroes module folder, super-heroes.service.ts file. My service file is created. And you can see in the superheroes module, there is an update. So first, if we go to superheroes module, here you can see inside of the providers, services will be registered. Generally, services are injectable providers. They need to be registered in the providers itself. Okay. Now go to the superhero service. Okay. So to communicate with our database, we have to create a model that represents our database collection. Okay. So inside of the constructor, we can create, okay, for creating that model, we have to use the injectable model token. Okay. To this, we have to specify our, generally, we have to specify our uh, schema class name. We know superheroes, our schema class name, right? Dot name, it's going to give this class name itself, nothing more. Okay, but we are just using the TypeScript function, TypeScript way of writing the code. If you want, you can directly write here by creating the double quotes. Okay, so this is also do same thing, just it will dot name gives this name as a string. Okay, so injectable token and our private variable. Okay, name it like superhero model. Now we have to define the type like model that loads from the Mongoose, the original library, and its type should be our superhero documentation type. We have exporting, right? Superhero documentation type. Like this, we need to export. Sorry, it is not at the rate injectable, at the rate injectable model. Okay. So this is our service look like. Now, now the thing is using this variable, I can filter, I can generate the query for filtering the my MongoDB. I can generate the query for fetching the data from the my MongoDB. I can generate the query for saving or updating the document into my MongoDB. Okay. So next we are going to create a one get endpoint. So that get endpoint fetches all the data from the MongoDB, and that get endpoint will return the response from the our NestJS application. Then that response will be captured by our Angular application, and it's nicely painted on the UI using our Angular components. Okay. Now we try to implement a HTTP GET endpoint at our Nest.js application, and then we try to consume that API in our Angular application. Okay, on receiving successful response, that response will be rendered on the UI of the Angular pages. Okay, so inside of the service, we know we have to write all the logic for interacting with our database, right? So now here we are going to implement a method for fetching the all documents from the MongoDB. Okay, so let's create a method. It will be asynchronous. A get all method, and it's going to return an array of our superheroes. So it will be a promise because of asynchronous, right? Okay, so of type superheroes, and here we are going to return. And we know this superhero model will have capability to interact with our superheroes collection in the MongoDB. So we will use it. So this dot superhero model dot find. Okay. So this find method will fetches the all the documents from the MongoDB collection. Okay, and dot execute. So it's going to execute the query. Okay, very simple. Just our supermodel find method fetches all the data and execute. This will be a query gets executed. Okay, now let's create a controller. Okay, in our superheroes module, and that controller will consume this method and then return the response to the clients whomever invokes our Nest.js API. Okay, so to create the controller in our superheroes model, so command is like nest space g for generate space co represents controller. Okay, and simply specify the controller name. Okay, and I don't want any spec files, no spec. Okay, now this superheroes controller will automatically added into this superheroes module folder. Okay, so let's run the command. Okay, here you can see superheroes controller got created, right? So let's go there. Okay, so this is a normal class. To make it a controller, it should be decorated with the controller decorator that loads from the nestjs/common. And inside of this controller, we pass a string, right? So this will be the part of the URL. Okay, so we are defining route here. So all these things automatically generated by nestjs CLI. Okay, now in this controller, let's first inject our service. Okay, Okay, injected the service. So we can consume the our superhero service in our controller. Now let's create a action method. Okay, I will name it like get all. Okay, and it should be decorated with @get attribute. Okay, so this get attribute makes our action method executes only for HTTP get request. Okay, and if you want to specify more URL, so this is part of the URL, right? Slash, if you want to specify something, you can specify here. So by default, if our controller have single @get decorated action method, then we no need to explicitly specify the route. But we have more than one, then we must specify the route. Okay. Now I can simply return this dot superheroes dot get all. Okay. This method automatically returns this response as 200 status. That means successful response. Okay. So my endpoint, get endpoint for fetching all records from the MongoDB is ready. Let's run and test whether our endpoint giving us results or not. Okay. So we know the command npm start. So application runs successfully. You can see our endpoint is generated in the console. So if I go to browser, so localhost, and we know the port number 3000 slash superheroes. See, I am getting data from my MongoDB collection. We have inserted one test record, right? That here underscore ID automatically written in the response by the our API. Okay, so this ID is automatically generated at the MongoDB collection. Okay, some unique identifier. So now I am ready with my API. Now I have to implement the logic to consume this API in my application. And once I got successful response, that response must be painted on the UI. Okay. So let's go to our Angular application. So first, uh, this is our Angular application, right? So first, let me create a component. Okay, simple component like all superheroes. Okay, and I am going to that component as my home route component. Okay, first let's create the component. Okay, for creating the component, we have Angular CLI command like ng base generate. So don't confuse with Nest CLI commands and Angular commands because every JavaScript based CLI commands almost look same. Okay. Through practice, we can habituated to them. Okay. So here is ng. In Nest application, we use Nest. Yes. I want component, right? Component. Okay. So now I want to create a all super component, right? So that I want to create one more parent folder like superhero so that I can create any component that related to superheroes under it. So specify the folder name superheroes. So if the folder is not already exist, then our CLI command automatically creates. Okay. Now let's specify the name of our component. All hyphen super heroes. And I don't want any test files. So I can specify a flag like hyphen hyphen skip hyphen tests. Okay. Now run the command. Okay, now we know our Angular component means three files it will contain component.ts file, component.html, component.css. So my all superheroes component created and app module also updated. Let's check what happening. Okay, if you go here, you can see a superheroes folder. In that I am having all superheroes folder. In that I am having component files, all superhero component. Okay, and if I go to app module, my component got all automatically declared in the declarations array. Okay, so if because of CLA, all some boilerplate code automatically happening. Otherwise, we have to create each file individually and we have to import them here. So that is the benefit of CLA. Most of the things, most of the startup things, it's going to do by itself, and it will help help us a lot. Okay, now I having all superheroes component, right? So I want to configure home route to this component. For that, I have to go to app routing module. Okay, here currently there is no routes created, right? So let's add a route. Okay, path. Path means we have to specify the route. I am mentioning home path, right? Home path is nothing but empty. Okay, domain. It's domain landing page. Okay, home page. So for that we have to register the component. I want to load all heroes component. Okay. Now let's run and test, because if you go to all superheroes component.html, there is some example text like paragraph all superhero works. So if our routing configuration is good, then this should be rendered. Okay. Now let's run our application. We know command to run our application ng serve. So our application is up and running. Let's test it. So we know Angular port is runs under 4200. See here, all superhero works. So this is the HTML inside of our all superheroes component that is rendering. But because we configured home page to that component. Okay. So next, let me create a model for my API response. We have a API response, right? Let's create a model. Okay. So because we are Angular is uses TypeScript, right? More type safety. So we have to define types for every response or model, everything. Okay, let's create a model. So I want to create this model inside of this superheroes folder. Okay, so command is like ng generate. So in general, response model, we always prefer to use the interface. Okay, and where I want to create inside of the superheroes folder. Right, what is I now after that specifying the folder path, we have to specify the file name we want to create. So I want to file name as superheroes only. Okay, so this is the folder and this is the interface name. Okay, let's run it. Okay, you can see superheroes.ts file got created. If we look at the folder structure, now it is, you can see under the superheroes folder we have superheroes.ts file, and here is our model. Now we have to populate the properties of this model exactly equal to this response model. Okay, so id string name string hours string franchise measure. Okay, our response model is ready. Now, in general, in Angular application also, any API calls logic must be created inside of the service file. Okay, so you can see most of the files in NestJS and Angular are similar because they both use TypeScript as their coding language. Okay, so here also we have to create the service file. So let's open terminal. So command is like ng generate, and we want to create a service, right? Service, and where I want to create inside of the superheroes folder and specify the name of your service file. I will give same name, superheroes. Okay, so how it will create means inside of the superheroes folder, super-heroes dot service dot CLI file gets created. Okay, so I don't want any spec files. Skip tests. Okay, file got created successfully. If I look at folder structure inside of the superheroes, Now I have superheroes.service file. Okay. So now here we can implement the our logic for invoking the API call. Okay. So to invoke the API call, Angular provides one object like HTTP client instance. So let's inject it. Okay. Private HTTP client. Okay. So let's import the namespace. Import from @Angular / common / HTTP. So here we will have HTTP client. Okay. So to use this HTTP client, we have to import HTTP client module. So let's go to app module.ts and in the imports array, let's import the HTTP client module. Okay. So HTTP client module that also loads from Angular common HTTP. Okay. So let's get back to our service. Okay, now I'm going to create a method that going to consume my get API. Okay, so I will create a method like get, okay, return. So I can use this .http client instance. So HTTP, it will have all types of HTTP request methods. So mine is get method, right? HTTP get, right? So I have to use get. Okay. And here I can specify the response type also. We know the response type superheroes. It will get collection of superheroes as a response. Okay, we are just typecasting. And here we have to pass our API URL. We know our API URL, right? Copy this, paste it over here. Okay, so now I have successfully created my uh, API call invocation logic. Right now the final thing pending, that is in our all superheroes component I have to get this API call, and after receiving successful response I have to bind it to the UI. So go to all components API call TS file. Okay, so first let's inject our service here, private superhero service. Okay, superhero service. Okay, now I want to create a variable, and that variable I am going to store the API response, so that I am going to use that variable in my HTML component HTML file and try to render the data inside of it. Okay, let me create a variable like superheroes. Okay, let's define its type collection of array. Initially, let's pass the empty array collection. Okay, so here you can observe our app component inheriting on init. That means we have to implement the ng on init. So this ng on init is nothing but a lifecycle method, Angular lifecycle method. This gets invoked once the component got invoked. This gets executed once the component is executed. Okay. So in this method, we have to call our API. So instead of creating all logic here, let's create a separate method and call that method inside of it. Okay. So let's create a method like get all. Okay. So this dot superheroes service dot get method. We have created get method, right? So we are calling this get method. Okay. So to read the response from the API call, we must subscribe it. Okay. And it's going to have a arrow function where it's going to receive the response data. So here now I got once the API is successful, all the data is subscribed into this data variable. Now I can assign the data to my this dot superheroes variable. Okay, so my TS logic completed, and but it should be invoked once the component is invoked, right? So we should call inside of the ngOnIt method. Okay, so we are good with TS file. Let's go to HTML file. So all superheroes component, let's remove this, and I'm going to use bootstrap container and give some margin top 2 pixels. Okay, so I want to display each item from the API in a card, bootstrap card. For that, go to bootstrap website Okay, and go to docs and go to cards, and at the bottom we will have a cards with spacing. Okay, so I want to have this design, so let's copy this. Okay, and paste it inside of it. Okay, so all these columns are duplicated, right? For example, so what we are going to do, we are going to loop them using the Angular ng for. So let's remove the static calls, because we are dynamically loop and render them. So let's keep only one uh, column. Okay, and to loop any content in Angular, we have a directive like star ng for. Okay, so this is going to loop the items in the array object. Okay, let item of. So here we have to specify the component variable. What is our component variable? Superheroes, right, where we store our API response. Okay, we are going to use that variable. So once we loop it, it will, for every loop, one item will be popped from this superhero array object, and that will be stored in this template variable item. Okay, so like that, each item in the loop will be rendered. So once loop started, each object sits into the item, right? So we can use item to render the content. So here, for rendering data dynamically, we have to use flower brackets, double brackets. Okay, inside of it, we can give expressions or dynamic properties, so that when the application is rendered, content is dynamically replaced there. Okay, so we have to use a double braces that we call string interpolation binding. Okay, so item dot, I have image URL property, right, in the response. Okay, okay, and here I am going to give the name of the superhero. So everything we can get from the item dot. Okay, so here I will bind the superhero powers. So powers, so for our basis item dot powers. Okay, and I want to display franchise as well. So for that, let's copy this p tag at the top. Okay, so here I want to bind franchise. Okay, so item dot franchise. Okay, like this we have to bind. So for binding, we have to use flower braces. Okay, for looping, we have to use the star ng for directive. Now I am done with my logic. My read operation is completed both at the NestJS and in my Angular application. Now let's test them. Okay, so make sure both the applications are running. So here my Angular application is running, and here my NestJS application is running. Okay, so if I reload Angular application, content is not rendering. Why? Let's see. So some error happened. So if you observe, the error is course issue. Okay, course issue means cross origin issue. Because why it is happening? Okay, let me reload again. So here API call is going, but it is rejected by the server. That is course error. Means if you observe, our API is running at localhost 3000. Our Angular is running is localhost 4200. That means they are different domains. When an API is trying to consumed by the different client domain, then it will get rejected. Okay, so for that our API must allow our client application. That means we have to enable the CORS at our NestJS application. So go to main.ts file. See, in the NestJS application, the error happening because API is rejecting, because hey, you are not my domain. I don't know who you are. So I'm not going to give my response to you. That's why it is rejecting my client, right? So if I enable cars, so enable cars, okay, like this in main.ts file. After the this line app equal to nest factory create, just add this line. Now this says our NestJS application can deliver to any kind of domain. So our NestJS application can be consumed by any application. If you want to restrict at our domain level also, you can do that. So for now, I am not going to explain that. So for now, what I am doing, NestJS application will serves our Angular client application. Okay, let's rerun the application again, NestJS application. So application is running successfully. Let's reload our Angular page. And you can see data got rendered. Image is little big, right? So for now, let's just ignore. And our content also rendering inside of the card. If you observe the network calls, our super API is 200 successful. Now our NestJS API accepted the request from our Angular application. And you can see API and request is get request and status is 200. That means success status. Inside of the response, in preview, we can see the response. So this is the single object that is sending from the server, and we rendered it successfully. Okay, let's give some height to this image to look little better. It like 250. Okay, somewhat better. So that means we are successfully reading our API and rendering the response in our Angular application. Okay. Next, we are going to implement the create operation. Means in NestJS API, we are going to create a create endpoint and we are going to create a form in our Angular application. So whenever the form submits, the create API will be consumed and data will be saved into our MongoDB. Okay. So let's try to implement the create endpoint and at the NestJS application, and in Angular we will create a form and we are going to use the NestJS API to save a new record into the MongoDB. Okay, so first let's begin by creating a HTTP post endpoint in the NestJS application. Okay, so go to NestJS application. So go to our services. Let's first implement the logic for saving the new record into the MongoDB database. Okay, so create a new method async and name it like create. Okay, and this method should contain the user entered payload, nothing but a new record or a new document that we want to save into our MongoDB collection. Okay, this is my payload and I will use my superheroes model itself, okay, as a reference. And now constant new superheroes, we cannot pass this object directly, okay, so we have to in this dot superhero model, okay, so we can instantiate it, okay, so open braces here and pass our payload into this object, okay, so this is nothing but this going to take the document or nothing but our payload and it will generate the appropriate superhero as a MongoDB understandable document. Okay. Now this document I can directly call save method. Okay. So return. So I'm just returning the newly created our record. Okay. So we can use new superheroes and it will have a method like save. Okay. So that's going to save our record into the new database and the newly created document will be written from this method. So here what we are doing, we are using our superhero model. Okay, initialize its object and passed our payload and we generated new superhero document and this will have a default method like save and invoking it our document gets saved into the MongoDB. Okay. Now let's consume this method in our controller. So go to superheroes controller. Okay. Now let's create the HTTP post method. Okay. So let's create a method like async create superhero. Okay. And to make this method HTTP post method, it should be decorated with the post. Okay. That loads from the NestJS common. So by decorating this decorator at the rate post makes our method only consumed by the HTTP post request. Okay, and this method should have payload. And to read payload, we cannot directly write a variable. Okay, we should read it from the body of the request. Okay, form body, just like form body. Okay, so at the rate body decorator should be added here, and that also loads from the NestJS common. And now define our payload variable. So I can name it like superheroes, any name you can give, and I can specify its type like my superheroes class. Okay. Now I can directly call my method. Okay. Return this dot create so this dot superhero service dot create. Okay, and pass our payload. Okay. So this is my HTTP post action methods. Okay, so let's rerun our Nest.js application. Okay, so after rerunning Nest.js application, let's get back to our Angular project. Okay, now I want to display a form, right? So what I will do, I will create a new component where I'm going to implement the form. Okay, so for that we know our Angular CLI commands, right? So ng generate component, and I want it to create inside of the superheroes folder. Okay, and name of my new component add superheroes. I don't want any spec files, so skip test. Okay, run the command. So my component got created. Okay, if I check the folder structure inside of the superheroes folder, now you can see a new component folder, that is add superhero. Okay, now first let's configure this superheroes new component routing. For that, go to app routing module. Okay, so here let's create a new route. So route can be specified at path property, right? So I will name my route like add superhero. Okay, and map the component we want to load for this route. That is our add superhero component. Okay, so now go to our Angular superhero service and let's implement the logic to consume the HTTP post API. Okay, so go to service file. Okay, so now this time we have to post our form data, right? So let's define a type for it. Okay, so ng generate. I want to create an interface. Okay, interface inside of the super heroes folder, and I'm going to name it like create hyphen r update. So I can use same model for creating the document or updating the document. Okay, so superhero. So run the command. Okay, so the command is successfully ran, and if I search for my creator update hero, okay, and its properties are almost equal to our superhero model, okay, except id. So why I am explicitly creating one more uh, entity instead of not using this superhero dto, this contains id, right? if we pass this ID value to the server, server get uh, return 500 error. Now let's go to our service file and let me create a new method like create, and this method should have input parameter nothing but our payload to our API. Okay, so superhero of type create superhero. Okay, and return this dot http dot, since it is a post request, right? It has post method, okay, default method, and it should invoke same endpoint, okay, but HTTP verb request will be post, okay. So based on request type, the action method will at the server will execute it. That is why same URL also not a problem to consume different methods at the server, okay. And here along with the URL, we have to pass a second parameter that is nothing but our payload, okay. So this is my logic, okay. Now let's go to our uh, add component dot ts file, okay. So here let me first create a model for my form, okay. Model means nothing but a variable. Let me create a superheroes model of type create superhero DTO, okay. Now let's define the empty data, because this model will be mapped to our HTML, okay, for form binding. So initially all the values will be empty, okay. So this is my method, and now let's create a method that's going to consume our superhero service. So the method now I am going to create will be invoked by a button click in our HTML file that we are going to understand in the upcoming steps. Okay, first let's create a method. So I will create like create method, and this has to consume our service, right? For that we have to inject our superhero service. So private superheroes service. Okay, now I can use the service and I can consume the create method. Okay, so for that I have to subscribe, right? Because to read the success of the API call. And here create method expecting input parameter that is nothing but the payload, that is nothing but our form user ended form data. So here we have our form variable that is superhero. And in the subscribe method, okay. So this is a form, right? After saving, I have to navigate back to home page. Okay, from the add form page to home page, I have to navigate back. So for that, I can inject one more service like router router service. So private router service. So this service loads from the Angular routing. Okay. So using this service, we can navigate to any component page. So I want to navigate to my home page component once I saved successfully. Okay. So this dot router dot navigate. And this method takes array, and that in the array first value will be our the path of the URL. Since it is a simple slash, right? That means just navigate back to our home page. Okay. So the logic inside of my TS component, we are done. Now we have to define the form in the HTML file. For that, go to our HTML file. So add superhero component HTML file. Let's add a container, bootstrap container. Give some margin top. And now let's add form heading by adding the less than tag. Okay. Simply add the heading like create. Okay. and add a form. Now inside of it, we have to add the form field. To do that, let's go to the Bootstrap website. Okay. And inside of the Bootstrap, go to docs, and here go for the forms. Okay. In the overview section. Okay. Here is a sample Bootstrap form. Let me copy this single div that contains text field. Okay. So add it here. So let me remove this div. Okay. So this is my simple div. But I want four text fields. One for name, franchise, URL, okay, power. So these are my document properties, right? So I need four fields. So let me create one, two. Actually, I want one field for text area. Okay, three text boxes and one text area. So let me, so go to form controls. Here is the text area example. So copy the second div and paste it here. Okay, these are our four fields. So first let's name the text field for name. Okay, and this label should be name of the superhero, and for should be match with our ID. Okay, same way text franchise. Okay, and this should be franchise, and we have copied text field of email type. Just uh, change it to text type. Okay, text type and text type and franchise, txt franchise and id value. Okay, and next thing is image url. Okay, and txt image url. Okay, and text. Okay, and assign this value. Same way for text area also, txt powers id text powers. And while using form control, it is recommended to give the name HTML name attribute as well. Okay, you can give name attribute like name, any value, unique value. Okay, franchise and image URL, and this one powers. Okay, now each text field we have to map with our form variable. Our form variable is superheroes, right? So copy this to make to enable form binding. We can use ng model. Okay, so to enable ng model, open braces, square braces, inside of it add closed braces and add ng model. So this will enable the two-way binding, means whether the data can be added from TS file to HTML file, or data can be read from HTML file to TS file. And to this property, we have to map the each property of the form. Okay, like this. So copy, paste it here, and map with their own property names. Okay, so this is called model binding or two-way binding in Angular. And copy image URL powers. But here we can see some red warning line is there, right? So that is because we are using ng model, right? if we are using ng model, we have to import the Angular form module in the app module. So go to app module and import the form module. So here in the imports form module. Okay, so that loads from the Angular forms. Okay, now if I go to my HTML file, now those red warning lines are disappeared. Okay, that means we are good. And let's add a button at the bottom. Okay, so button. I will take type like button so that form won't reload the page, entire page. Okay, and class btn primary, and button must be mapped with the method inside of the TS component. Means button event. Button have many events, right? One of the event must be registered with the method inside of the uh, TS file. But when the form should be submitted on click of the button, right? So we have to register the click event. So to register the click event in Angular, open circular braces and inside of it specify the name of the event. So here you can see if auto intelligence. So you can type like click. So to this click event, I have to map the method in the component file. So go to component, we have create method, right? So map it. So on clicking the button, form get posted. Okay, name it like create. Okay, now we are done with our changes. Let's try to create a new record. Okay, let's go to our Angular application. So now I am on the home page, but I have to navigate to my create page, right? That means we must have a button here on the home page so that on clicking that button, I can navigate back to my create form page. For that, go to our Angular application and go to the all components HTML file. Okay. Here, let me add one more row. Okay. And give some margin padding for here also margin top and define the column. And I want button should be at the middle, column D4 and offset MD4. Okay. So that going to place our button in the middle of the area. Okay. So here I'm not using button directly. I'm going to use the anchor tag. So why I am using anchor tag means for navigating the one page to another page in Angular, most preferred is anchor tag. Okay. But I want a look and feel of anchor tag is like a button, so I can apply the button classes. Okay. Button primary. And to navigate, on clicking this anchor tag, the page should not be reloaded for navigation. So without reloading, and we have to navigate. For that, we can use Angular decorator like router link. So it will simply navigate to the component, Angular component without reloading the entire page. Okay. Add. So what is our route? Go to route app routing module and copy this and assign it to the router link. And one more thing, the route should be prefixed with slash, any route. Okay. And here create superhero. Okay. Now let's go to our Angular application. Now we got the superhero button, right? If I click on it, I must navigate to my add superhero component. See, I am navigated here. Okay. But here button is not visible properly. So what happened? Sorry, it is BTN primary. Okay. Okay, you can see the create. So now let's create a new superhero. So I have already saved some sample data for create new item. So I'm copying it. Okay. Okay, I have populated the sample data. Now open the developer console and network calls and XHR so that we can see the request gets invoked. Okay, now click on the create button. See, data is saved and I am navigated to home page and you can see our new record here. Okay, if I go to network calls, here you can see first request. First request is HTTP post. That means our create request. If you see the payload, so this is the payload we are passing. Okay, and here you can see 201 means data is successfully created at the server. Okay, so that is the first request, post request. If you see the second request, see request method is get. That means this is our get request. Okay, and if you observe the preview, here you can see two records. Means our second record, which we entered in the form, is successfully saved into the database and it is returning as a response in our get API and that is rendering on the page. So from this we can understand. So let's reduce this. Let's try to reduce the size. So go to our all superhero component and make this MD3 means I want 3 columns per row. Okay. Okay. Now it is just shrink and looks better. Okay. So now we are done with the create operation. Next, we are going to do the update operation. Okay. For that, we are going to create an update endpoint at the NestJS application, and in the Angular application, we are going to create a update form. Okay. Now we are going to implement the update operation. Okay. For that, we are going to add a edit button on each card. Okay. So on clicking edit button, we are going to show a update form in our Angular application. On submitting the update form, we have to create a update endpoint in our NestJS application so that on submitting form data can be posted to that update API. Okay, and along with update API, we need to create one HTTP GET endpoint in our NestJS application. So that GET endpoint returns the data by ID because in update form we have to display the record that we want to update, right? So for that we have to use that HTTP GET by ID. Okay. So first let's implement the logic at our NestJS application. Okay. So first, let's try to implement the endpoint HTTP GET endpoint where we are going to give a response by ID. Okay. So for that, first let's go to superhero service. Okay. Here, let's create one more method like async get by ID. Okay. So this parameter will have input parameter like our ID, which is a string. Okay. And from here, I'm going to return this dot superhero model dot okay find by ID. You can see the default method find by ID that expects the ID value as the input parameter, and you can call simple execute. Okay. So this query filters the document from the MongoDB collection based on the ID we passed. Okay. Now let's consume this method into our new HTTP GET endpoint. So go to superhero controller. Let's create a sync. Okay. get by ID. Okay, and this should be a get request, right? At the rate get, and we have to define a route expression here. Okay, whatever expression we are giving here will be part of the URL. Okay, so here I want to add a dynamic expression. So to add a dynamic expression, we have to use colon and name of the variable. Okay, IDs. That means ID will be the part of the URL. Okay, and semi is colon in front of the ID represent it is a dynamic value. This can be any value. Okay, so to read this value into our action method. Okay, so we have to use decorator like param, and we have to specify the name, which type of dynamic variable I want to read, ID. Okay, and I can give a normal ID and it is a string. So param, what it will do, it searches for the ID placeholder value from the URL and it pushes into this variable. Okay, that is the use of the @param. So now I simply return this dot superhero service dot get by ID. Okay, so we are done with the get by ID endpoint. Okay, now let's implement one more endpoint, that is update endpoint. So to implement the update endpoint means we have to update a document in the MongoDB collection. For that, first write the logic for database interaction. Okay, so here one more method, async update. Okay, and this method going to resource two parameter. One is the ID value. Okay, document ID which we want to update, and another is the payload to update into the document. Okay, now here what I can do, I will simply return and await. This is also async. Please await it here. Okay. Now await this dot superhero model dot find by ID and update. So it's going to find by ID to find the document and update the document. So it expects few parameters like document ID and payload to update. Okay. And next one more parameter options I can give like new. Okay, true. So what is this new true means? Okay, by default, the find by ID update will return uh, the document data before updated. Okay, so to get the data after updated, you should pass option like new colon true. Okay, now let's create the HTTP put endpoint. For update, we have to use the verb HTTP put so that only HTTP put request can execute our endpoints. Okay, so let me create the new endpoint here. Async. Okay, async update superheroes, my method name, and it should be the at the rate put decorator. That means only HTTP put request uh, can execute this method or access this method, and this at the rate put comes from the NestJS common. Okay, and here we are going to give the dynamic URL part, that is our ID. We know dynamic prefixed with colon and the ID. Okay, we know how to read the ID value, right? So at the rate param decorator and name of the dynamic replace holder ID and ID string. And remaining form data or document data we have to update. We read it from the body because those are form data, right? At the rate body. Okay. Superheroes, heroes type. Okay. Now Let's use our update method in our service. Await this dot superhero service dot update and pass our ID and superheroes data. Okay, so that's our endpoint. Okay, now let's rerun our API project. Okay, here you can see the new routes of our action methods are displaying for HTTP get by ID and HTTP put action methods are generated. Okay, so now we are done with the logic at our NestJS application. Let's get back to our Angular application. Okay, so we have to display the update form, right? For that, we will create a new component. Okay, so ng generate component. I want it inside of the superheroes folder, right? Superheroes and edit hyphen super hyphen heroes. This is my component name. I don't want any spec files. Keep yes. Okay, run it. Okay, here our component got created. Let's check it. Okay, inside of the superheroes folder, and here is our edit superheroes component. Okay, so first let's configure the edit superheroes component, our new component routing. For that, go to app routing module. Okay, and here we have to define the path to our component. Okay, so path edit superhero, and along with the static URL, here our path should contain the dynamic part. Okay, because our ID, see that whichever item we want to edit, that record ID should be in the URL so that we can use that ID in our edit component. Okay, so that means ID value will be a dynamic, right? So to define the dynamic content, just like NestJS, we can use same in Angular. So semicolon and ID. So here ID is the dynamic replaceable content, any value. It doesn't matter for the Angular, any value it will come. But we have to read it in our edit component and also map the component. Right? So we are good. We have mapped our edit routing. Now let's go to our superhero service in the Angular project, and let's implement for logic to invoking the HTTP get endpoint by ID and also the update endpoint. Okay, so first get by ID. Okay, it's going to receive the ID as input parameter. Okay, return this dot HTTP get. Okay, since here we have to add the dynamic URL, right? We have to use backticks. Okay, and copy our endpoint. Okay, and slash dollar and open the flower bracket. So within this flower brackets, we can push our dynamic content. So ID I have to push. Okay, so that's going to return the single superhero by ID. Okay, so that is our get by ID endpoint. Now let's also define the update endpoint. So I'm going to name the method like update. Okay, and it should contains ID and also the superhero content. So which is of our type creator update hero type. Okay, and return, since it is the update, right? So that means put request. So this dot http dot put. Okay, and to this put I can copy this URL because ID value should be within the URL, and then comma I have to pass one more parameter, that is nothing but payload, which is our superhero model. Okay, so these are our two endpoints. logic in our Angular application. Okay, so now let's go to our edit component, ts file. We have to read the ID of the record in the URL. Okay, to read it, we have to inject the activated route service. So inside of the constructor, so name it like route, and service will be activated route. Okay, using this activated route service, I can read the URL contains ID value. Okay, so to read it, I'm going to use it in the ng unit because on component rendering, we are depending on the ID value. So let's read it. So this dot route dot param map. So it is a observable. Subscribe to this param map. Okay, and params any variable name. Okay, so in this subscription, we have to read the param. So params dot get and specify the URL parameter. So this parameter name must be equivalent to the uh, dynamic value placeholder we have defined in our route. So go to app routing module. Here we have added the placeholder, right? ID, copy that name, okay, and pass it here. So Angular can read the this placeholder value from the URL, and we have to store it in the variable. So I'm going to create a variable here, item ID, officially empty. So let's assign to this red warning line. So here red warning line specifying that our string we define string, but param may give null value. So to overcome this error, double quotations and give the empty. That means if this returns null value, then assign this empty value to this variable. Okay. So now let's invoke the get API call. Okay, get by ID we have defined in our service, right? Let's consume this endpoint. So let me create a method here, get by ID, and let's inject the service. So private superheroes service, okay, and we can consume now this dot superheroes. Sorry, name it like superheroes service, okay. Superheroes service dot get by ID. To this we have to pass the item ID that we want to edit, okay, and let's subscribe it. So it's going to return the data from the server that we requested record, okay. Now we have to bind the data from the API call to our form. Till now we haven't defined any edit form, right? So let me go to add TS component, okay. In if you recall, the superheroes object is the model for binding to our form, right? So just copy this entire object, okay, and paste it over here. So here also this is my form model, okay. So import the namespace, and now let's map the server data to my form model, okay. So superheroes dot franchise equal to data dot franchise. This dot superheroes dot image URL equal to data dot image URL. This dot superheroes dot name equal to data dot name. This dot superheroes dot powers equal to data dot powers. So that is the response mapping, right? Now let's add the form in our HTML. That form uses this model binding for reading or updating the form. For that, we simply copy the form from the add superheroes HTML, okay, to save some time. So go to edit superheroes.html, paste it over here. Let's do some changes. So change it like update heading, and here we are mapping the superheroes model name, okay, and franchise, just like same object we are using in the edit form also, right? So there won't be any changes in the HTML mostly. And for now, let me remove the click event for the, this should be update, okay. And now let's run and check whether we are able to populate the item that we want to edit on the form, okay. But to check, we need to have a edit button here, right? For every code, individual code, it must contains the edit button. So first let's define that edit button. For that, let me go to all superheroes component.html, and here I am going to add one more card body, okay. So div. Now here I am going to add the button. For editing, I have to navigate to another page, right? So instead of button, I am going to use the anchor tag, but I am going to apply the button styles. Okay. So anchor tag, edit, and we want button styles, right? So btn primary. Okay. And we know router link, we have to use Angular attribute for navigating the another component without page loading, right? But here we are going to wrap it around square braces router link, and so that I can create the dynamic URL. If there is no dynamic URL, that if it is a static, then we simply remove router link. If you recall, for add button, we have directly added, right? It is a simple string, right? So we didn't added any square brackets around the router link. Since now we have to define the dynamic route, because dynamically we have to append the item to item ID in the URL. Okay. So first part will be our part of the routing. Okay. So single quotes. So go to app routing module. Just copy this edit superhero string. Okay. And go to all superheroes component and paste over here. And second parameter, I can pass my dynamic value. Like this array of items should be passed here. So automatically URL will be generated by the Angular. So here second value is ID, right? Because here ID is a dynamic value, right? So for that I have to pass it here. So item dot underscore ID. Now once it is rendered, it is generated like slash edit superhero slash ID value. Okay. Now test it. Now here we have edit button, right? Let me click on edit so that I have to navigate back to my edit form. And also we are invoking the API call, right? And one more change I forgot to add. Go to edit component.ts. I have created this get by ID, but I am not invoking it. So it should be invoked here itself. Okay, this dot get by ID. So once we reading the ID, we are invoking the API call. Okay. Now let's go to our website. Go to network calls. Okay. Clear them. Click on edit button. See, I am able to land on update form, and in the URL you can see ID value that we want to edit. Okay, and here see entire data is populated. And if you go to network call, this is our network call, get by ID API call invoking. And if you observe the preview, response preview, this one. So we are successfully populating our edit form with the item that we want to edit. Okay. Now on updating, we have to save the data back to our Mongo database, right? And then we must go back to our home page. Okay. For that, in edit component, I will create a one more method like update. Okay. Update. And we know in our service, we have defined our update API call, right? So ID and our payload form payload must be sent to the API. So for that, let's go to edit component. So this dot superhero service dot update and pass this dot item ID comma this dot superhero form model directly I can pass and subscribe to it. On successful response, I want to navigate back to my home page. So for that, we have to inject one more Angular service, that is private router, name it like router, and service is router. So that also loads from the Angular routing. Okay. So now using the router service, I can navigate back to my home page. This dot router dot navigate, okay, and open circular braces. Inside of it, pass the array and define the path. Since it is a home path, right? Simple slash is enough. Okay. And register this update method with the update click event, button click event. So here. So we know that click must be registered like this. Okay. Now let's test this as well. Let's clear everything. Click on edit button. We got data API call, get by ID API call invoked, and let me update the superpowers to not available. Okay, and click on update. See, I have navigate back to home page, and this is the updated value. And if you go to here, see, this is my put method, nothing but the update method. Payload. This is my payload that is populated from my form, edit form. It is posted to the server and it is successfully saved. Okay. If you have any doubts, if you refresh, content must be come from API, right? See, that means update is successful. Okay. Next, we are going to implement the delete operation example. And now we are going to do final operation, that is delete operation. For that, we are going to create a API, delete API at our NestJS application. And inside of the Angular application, we are going to add a delete button here. So now for delete operation, we don't go to another page. We stay on our home page, but we are going to show the bootstrap model pop-up, okay, as a confirmation box, whether to delete or to ignore, okay. So first let's go to our NestJS application and add the delete endpoint. So in our NestJS application, first let's implement the logic for interacting with the DB for deleting the specified document from the MongoDB collection. Okay, go to superhero service. Here let me add a new method. Okay, async delete, and it should have ID value as the input parameter. Okay, and I can simply call await and this dot superhero model dot find by ID and remove I can use. Okay, ID. So this method going to remove the specified ID related document from our MongoDB. Now let's consume this method from our new delete endpoint. For that, go to superheroes controller. Okay, let's create a method. So async delete superhero. Okay, and it should be decorated with the @ delete decorator. Okay, So that delete decorator also loads from the nestjs/common. So this makes our method should only gets invoked for HTTP delete requests. Okay, and here we have to create the dynamic URL expression, that is the ID value, and we have to read that into our method. For that we have to use the param decorator and specify the ID. Okay, and ID string, and simply I'm going to call the my service delete method. Okay, this dot superhero service dot delete and pass the ID value. Okay, so we are done with the delete endpoint. So let's rerun the application. Okay, okay, our Nest.js application is up and running. Let's get back to our Angular application and let's go to our all components, because that is our home component, right? So now let's add the Bootstrap model HTML into this page. Okay, for that go to Bootstrap website. Okay, and go to the components and select model. Okay, so from this model, let's copy this content. Okay, let me copy this content. Okay, so this is my model HTML, and here is the additional button which we don't want here. Delete it. And one main thing is to interact with this HTML model for displaying or hiding, we mainly depends upon the ID value. So name it clearly. Okay, and let me give the title like warning, and in the body, are you to delete the item? Okay, so now I have added the HTML content. Now let's go to our TS file, all component.ts file. So this bootstrap, we have to use the bootstrap model instance to consume it in our Angular application, which is available in the Windows scope. So to declare the Windows scope on top of the component, you can declare like declare where Windows any. So this is going to get the scope of our browser window document. Okay. Next, in the ng on init, let's uh, initialize the bootstrap model instance. Okay. So for that, let me create a variable like delete model. Okay. To this variable, I am going to assign the bootstrap model instance. Okay. So this dot delete model equal to new window dot c. We have declared window, right? Top. From the window, I am getting the bootstrap instance now. Okay. Bootstrap dot model, capital M. And inside of it, we have to define the ID value. Okay. So to get the, we have to pass the ID value. What ID value? Our bootstrap model ID value. How we can get? We can get document dot element by ID. Okay, get element by ID, and to that pass the ID value of our bootstrap instance. Okay. Okay. Now let's create a method to open the delete confirmation model. Okay. Method like open delete confirm delete pop-up. Okay. And it will read the ID value, nothing but the item to delete. Okay. And to store this value, let me create a variable like item to delete. Okay. Initially empty. So once the pop-up opens, we are going to assign the item.delete equal to ID value. And now we have to open the pop-up. So to open the pop-up, we have variable the delete model that has the instance of bootstrap, right? So that we can uh, control it. So this dot delete model dot show. So this method going to open up our model. Okay. And in the HTML, let me change this. This will be a close button. Two buttons are there, right? Close button, fine. And save changes. Let me change it to confirm delete. And it should be red color. Okay, danger. Okay. And here for each item we have to add the delete button, right? So next to the edit button, let me add the button. Since here we are not navigate into any other component, right? So I will use button itself directly. Okay. So button type will be button so that it won't reload the page, and class btn danger. Okay. Delete, and it click should be registered with our open model pop-up, open delete pop-up. Okay. Okay, now test whether we are able to open the bootstrap pop-up or not, and it is expecting the item.id as a input value, right? So pass that value as well. Okay. So let me go to our website. Here is the delete button. If I click on delete button, see, we are getting the confirmation pop-up, delete confirmation pop-up. If I click on close, pop-up will be closed. Okay. If I click on confirm delete, I have to invoke the API call and then close the pop-up. Okay. So we have to invoke the API call, right? For that, first go to our service file to implement the logic for invoking the delete API call. Okay. So delete, and it should have ID value as the input parameter. Okay. So here return this dot http dot delete. Okay. And just copy this URL. Okay. ID is passing dynamically. Okay. That's it. That is our delete API call. Okay. Now we have to consume this in our all super component. So in all super component, let me create a new method like delete. Okay. So this dot superhero service dot delete, and we have to pass our this dot item to delete value and subscribe. So on successful delete, right? We have to close the pop-up. For that we can use this the delete model, and now we have to call the hide method. Okay. And we have to register this delete method with our confirm delete button click event. Okay. Click. Okay. Now let's test it whether the delete API invoking and item is deleting successfully or not. Okay. Somewhere delete is not method. Save it. Files are not saved correctly. Okay. Now no issue. Now if I click on button and if I go to network calls, clear the network calls and click on confirm delete. See, pop-up is hidden, but from UI we are not removing. Okay, but API call is invoked. It is successful, means at the server we deleted the item. Okay, this is our delete API call. At the server we deleted the item, but we forgot to remove it from the here from list, right? See, if I reload the page, now the item is gone. So the logic I am missing here is I have to remove the item from my, so this superheroes array of values we are binding, right? From this we have to remove the item as well. Okay, so that it will be removed from the UI as well. So this dot superheroes equal to this dot superheroes, we have to filter such a way we have to exclude the, or this dot item to delete. Okay, so sorry, not triple equal to, not equal to. So what we are doing, our API delete API call is successful, but we are forgot to remove it from the UI. So that I am filtering my superheroes object in such a way I have to remove the item to delete, okay, from the array. Now let's test again. I have single object, right? Let me try to remove this one. So confirm delete. See, now I am able to delete it from the UI. So that's all guys. We are done with the delete operation as well. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this video delivered some useful information to you all. If you like the content, please do support me by subscribing to my channel. Soon we are going to meet with the new videos. Until then, signing off.